On first and second down, obviously there's some growth opportunities coming out of this game for us. Just play cleaner and more efficient football. On my side, this is Kellen Moore speaking, quote, I'm going to focus on how I can help from play design, from sequencing within a game. All of those things just have to give us a chance. Obviously, there's plenty of good throughout the season and throughout even the past game in some situational football. We did a really good job. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's coaches' common, tendencies to say, I need to do a better job, that I will be better, and we will get this figured out. All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. It's Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get his take on it. And what can the Eagles do to ignite this passing game? Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast joins me now as the Eagles face some questions about the passing and their offense, but mostly the passing, obviously, because their offensive, the rushing attack has been the best in football. So it's not what the offense's problem is, it's what's the passing problem. So what can the Eagles do to ignite this struggling passing game? We bring in Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast for today's Football at 4. And that's the question, Geoff, that everybody wants to know. What can they do to fix this passing game?
Well, geez, Mike, if I knew the answer to that, you would probably see me at the podium at the NovaCare complex instead of Kellen Moore, right? It's not an easy answer, Mike, but I can tell you this. And I've talked to a couple of people on this, and we all kind of agree that this is an issue that shouldn't be what it is because the Eagles are running the ball so well. So when you have a dominant running game like this, then you've got to be able to marry that with your passing game, and it should be easier. You should be wide open at times because you're working off of play action, and that's not what's going on with the Eagles right now. They've got to do a better job of that. I watched the All-22. I think just watching it, Mike, sometimes the Eagles would run the ball 3, 4, 5 times in a row, and they would have success running the ball. And if you're the Panthers, it seemed like the strategy was, okay, we know at some point you have to pass the ball. And if you notice, the Panthers blitzed the Eagles a lot, and I think it's because the Eagles get a little predictable now on when they're going to throw the ball. If you run the ball 4 or 5 times, defense is going to know, no matter how much success you have, that eventually you're going to try to pass, even if you're making it look like play action or disguising it with a couple of tight ends on the field. So I think they've got to – I know this. Everybody's going to say, well, first you say don't throw, now you're saying throw. But I think they do have to mix run and pass early a little better, and I do think they have to figure out a way to be less predictable on when they are going to throw the ball. The opening of the third quarter, Mike, they tried a play action that didn't – well, it could have worked, but AJ didn't throw Jones didn't throw the ball. Then they ran the ball 7 straight times into Carolina territory, but then they hit 3rd and 4. And even though the Eagles will run sometimes on 3rd and 4, the Panthers expected, rightly so, a pass. They blitzed, and Jalen Hurts got a hit. So that's what I'm saying. I think one of the big things they have to get back to is mixing it early better. But, of course, that also involves the quarterback seeing it, the receivers running their routes, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's go through the individual guys here. A.J. Brown, he's open. Is there anything that he can do to help the situation? Or is he – I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous to ask. But, you're trying to find from all angles how this thing can possibly be fixed. Is there something that Brown, Smith, the receivers, that they can do?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I observed anything where they ran poor routes. We could talk about, hey, if they throw a quick screen to Dotson and you're the lead blocker, put a little bit more into the blocking. But that's, this is not going to solve the downfield element that is missing from their pass game. And, Mike, that's really, I think, what we have to talk about. I don't think anybody in my position or yours is saying the Eagles need to completely be a top 5 passing team, right? We're just saying there was a time where...
Well, let me interject with that real quick. I don't think we're saying they have to be, but we're perplexed on why they aren't.
Well, that's a week, that was a bye-week conversation. Now we're perplexed why we aren't, but at least we understand, A, they have an amazing running game, and B, quarterback was really struggling to see certain concepts. But even so, Mike, when they started this winning streak and started playing better, even if they weren't throwing the ball a lot, they were generating explosive plays. You were seeing A.J. Brown having big games and Jalen Hurts throwing outside the numbers and things like that. That's the part of the offense that over the last 2 weeks, I'll say, and maybe a little bit longer than that, have sort of disappeared. And that's the part that has to come back, because when the Eagles do that, they're a pretty unstoppable team, even if Jalen Hurts is only throwing the ball 20 times, completing 15 to 17 passes out of 20 to 23 attempts.
Yeah, because I think the perplexing part about this is any team in this league, if you said they had A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, this offensive line, Saquon Barkley, and you insert quarterback into that mix, you're going to say, holy mackerel, they're going to score 50 points a game. And Barkley, who's the problem? Brown's pretty darn good. It's not him. We like Smith. He's not at fault here. Okay, the tight end's in and out of the lineup. Is that really holding this offense back? I think the offensive line is pretty good. So what is it? Oh, well, is it as simple as the quarterback's just not good enough?
It's that simple, at least for the last 2 weeks. I feel like sometimes, how it is. One game, you always say everybody just remembers what happened last week. And it's really only been 2 weeks that this, to me, has really stuck out as a problem as far as not driving the ball down the field or getting some 20 and 30-yard plays. I think
because the narrative of this offense, Moshe, was that the big play, they're hitting the big play. They don't throw it all that much, but it's a 40-yard touchdown. It's a 36-yard touchdown. So he was ripping it down the field.
Yes, he was. And it's not like it's been 8 weeks of him not doing that. It's just that's been the more recent thing. But, you don't want that at the same time to become the trend now. You don't want to see that this is what defenses are doing.
Right.
And all of a sudden Jalen is becoming more and more reluctant to pull the trigger and then make that a downward spiral. So it can come back, but that's the thing. You don't want it to fester and linger and keep going.
Right. So I know it's unfair to say, if Joe Burrow was the quarterback in Philly, this team would be unstoppable, or if Patrick, but I don't know. I think there's even times where Tua, if Tua was playing quarterback in this offense, would they score 40 points a game?
It's a good question. I mean, I think if you had it's funny you say that, Mike. I was literally wondering about what if a different kind of quarterback was the quarterback for this, and not even an all-pro one.
Right. I'm just going middle of the road. I'm just finding
Geno Smith.
Right. I'm just finding a guy who's between 10 and 20.
Right. Geno Smith, I think, is having a better year than people realize, and is probably a better quarterback than people realize. They don't see him play around here on a week-to-week basis, but he's got Metcalf, he's got Smith and Jigba, so he knows what it's like to have some pretty good receivers, and he's throwing the ball to them, and he's getting the ball to them deep, and their running game is pretty good when Walker is healthy. And you think if you put a guy like that, who the thing about Geno when you watch him is he's just not afraid to make throws, and he has thrown interceptions, but it doesn't make him skittish about the next pass. If you just had someone like that, I've been wondering that, but Mike, what are we saying here? What would the Eagles be? They'd probably still be 11-2. I mean, you're going to lose a game here and there, no matter how good you are. Josh Allen just has touchdowns and lost. So it's more about your potential as a team than what you would be with a different quarterback.
And that's where
the potential of the Eagles looks threatened right now.
Exactly, and that's a great landing spot for this, because I think that's what the outburst is the potential. It's the big picture. And I think A.J. Brown felt that the big picture and the potential was finally threatened after watching the way they performed. It's okay when you're beating Baltimore and you're beating Washington, because those teams are perceived to be good. And those are man, we had some nice, impressive wins, even though I'm not catching the ball. But to win the Super Bowl, we've got to be able to beat Carolina without them dropping a pass. And I felt like the potential got threatened, and that caused Brown. Because I guess I'll ask, do you think there's a rift between Brown and Hurts that is not fixable, or that that a rift even exists?
I don't know of anyone that exists. I know that they were very, very close quite a while ago. I mean, when Brandon said things have changed, I don't know if he meant that as their relationship has changed, or that when you're a quarterback and a receiver, that's a different relationship than friend to friend. I've seen plenty with my own eyes and video of them celebrating touchdowns, laughing on the sideline. If they're arch enemies, they're doing an amazing job. Or if they have a rift, they're doing a great job of hiding it. I don't think it's a rift. I don't think I think that they might not be as close as they used to be because they're a lot older than when they were in high school, and things have changed. They have families and livelihoods off the field that may not correspond to each other's livelihoods. But no, I don't know of anything of a rift. And I've been told A.J. Brown's a good guy and a good teammate and generally likable. I don't think this is anywhere near what I've seen about T.O. and dividing the locker room type thing. I think this team is pretty close. I think the big thing here is this: they all recognize that they're leaving meat on the bone and it could be better. No one's denying that. You don't have one person on one side, the other person on the other side, and pointing fingers at each other. And, wisely, A.J. Brown never even mentioned Jalen Hurts' name, even if you knew that's what he was talking about. So I don't think it's as bad as maybe it seems when you talk about it for 3 or 4 straight days.
We're talking with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. Make sure you check out the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. How do you think Nick Sirianni has handled this in the days after?
Great, to be honest with you. I mean, I know in his conference today he was asked about how he's dealing with it, and he didn't really answer the question about how he's dealing with it. He mostly just said that we only see 3 hours of a day and don't really know what it's like being inside the NovaCare complex and seeing the relationships. But then he didn't really expand on how those relationships are. He just kind of talked about his vantage point. But I think that the players really like Sirianni. They respect him. They play for him. And because of that, I think he can handle those situations really well and have conversations with those guys. And again, I don't know that there had to be a whole lot of mending going on. A.J. Brown wasn't the only person to express dissatisfaction with the passing offense. And I'll keep saying, I'm sure Jalen Hurts wasn't really thrilled with. I think he even said it in his press conference, and I know he said it before. I got to be better. Things have to start with me. So this is not a situation where I think you're dividing people. I think they're all frustrated by the passing offense.
So where do they go from here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. Adam Kaplan had a really interesting conversation. We talk a lot with John DeFilippo. He was the quarterbacks coach of the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl. He appears a lot on our platform. And Adam talked to him recently and said on the podcast this morning that when you have a quarterback who doesn't see it or doesn't make the play, it's there. The only thing you can do is keep repping it, keep doing it, until the quarterback starts to do it and see it more. And if he doesn't, then you keep doing it, you keep repping it, because that's what coaches do. We rep and think that the light will come on at some point. And he also says you can't just stop throwing the ball either. And that's where I feel like the Eagles the last few weeks, it's not that they stopped throwing the ball, but it's like every pass is either an RPO or a play action. It seems like they've sort of thrown in the towel on some more complex passing concepts. And listen, I get it. And I think that's the cycle, because earlier in the year they did come out throwing to get him in a better rhythm, and it didn't work. So now they're running, and now that's being predictable. It's not an enviable position that Kellen Moore and the coaching staff, offensive staff, is in, obviously, right? But it's not like you can radically do anything different. So I think DeFilippo's words ring true here, is that you just have to keep repping it. And I personally hope, Mike, that you don't throw in the towel here in the ensuing weeks, the next 4 weeks, and just kind of like run until you have to pass. I'll answer the question the same way I said the first one. I think you've got to mix it up a little bit better earlier in the game. And guess what? If you lose because of it, I get it. That sucks. And listen, I'm not saying go out and try to lose or try to do something that's not part of your game plan, right? But I'm saying at the trajectory you're going, you might lose these games, 1 or 2 of these games anyway, because you're trending downward with your pass offense anyway. So you've got to win, but you also have to figure out in 4 weeks, because the bigger goal here is the Super Bowl, on how to be a better and more diverse overall offense.
Yeah, I real quick, I saw Jason Avant, who does work on your platform. He was on TV the other day, and he said, look, these are 4 plays. I could find 10 plays that Jalen is just not throwing the ball. I want to get your take on number one. Is that every week or was that this week?
Repeat the quote. It was 4 plays or 10 plays, you said?
Avant was on NBC Philly, doing one of his little, cut-ins, and, he said, okay, we're going to look at these 4 plays. He said, I brought up 4, but I could have brought up 10 more of how frequently there were guys open that he did not throw the ball, and I'm wondering if that's this game or is this a weekly occurrence?
So this is a really interesting conversation, too, because I've obviously talked with Jason about it as well.
Yes.
There are some plays where, all right, I think we talked about this on Monday, first play of the pass of the game, A.J. Brown, you got to make that throw. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, there's probably 3 to 4 examples of those, and maybe those are the ones that Jason showed.
He showed a lot of he showed one of the plays was the Calcaterra touchdown. The other one's the Smith touchdown. He showed a slant where, Brown is open. There was one, I think the one you're talking about early in the game where, he's saying, look, you got one-on-one. The safety's not helping over the top. You got one-on-one with Brown. You just throw it up to him.
Right. So the first play that I think I just talked about a few minutes ago, the first play of the second half, they come out, 2 tight ends, quarterback under center, clearly trying to look like, a run play, and the Panthers have 5 guys at the line of scrimmage. So when it winds up being like a 3-man route, but when, with the Panthers doing what they could to defend the run, because the Eagles look like they're going to run, when Jalen Hurts turns around, I would say the 2-man route was man coverage. So it's not wide open like sometimes we see in the NFL, like you watch a 49ers game and Juwan Jennings catches the ball and nobody's near him, or George Kittle, right? But they're open, they're NFL open, meaning if you throw the pass that maybe if you're watching the Bengals and you see Burrow throw to Jamar Chase where there's a corner there behind like in the hip pocket of the receiver, but the receiver still has the leverage, that's an NFL throw that you have to make. I think that's what Jason's getting at. There's 4 to 5 to 6 throws where you even see on the Mike, Jalen sort of cock the arm like he's going to throw it and doesn't. And in the NFL, if people always say, well, why do people, talk about this quarterback or not Jalen Hurts and that quarterback and not Jalen Hurts? Well, because those guys make those throws more often than they don't. Of course, they miss them too, because I constantly hear that. Why don't you talk about other quarterbacks who miss passes? Because they make those quote-unquote NFL throws to their receivers who have just the slightest bit of step but leverage on the defender. And those are the throws right now, and for a while, really, that Jalen doesn't really like to throw and doesn't throw. Now, let me just put the disclaimer
real quick. Let me just want to throw this out.
You can find some examples of it, Mike, right? We know that there are some examples of Jalen being able to do it, but I'm talking about what he will routinely also not do.
Yes. By the way, A.J. Brown is at his locker. He, according to E.J. Smith, who covers the Eagles, said this is quite possibly the largest media scrum I have seen in my 6 years covering this team. So A.J. Brown is at his locker. He says, quote, his passing comment was misconstrued. People assumed he was talking about Jalen Hurts. He is talking about the passing attack. Now, obviously, they've had 3 days to come up with that, and that's what he's come up with.
Great. Now everybody is going to go and blame Kellen Moore.
Well, it's funny you say that because I wanted to – my follow-up to the conversation we were having about Avant was going to be Kellen Moore and the coaching staff, in that if guys are open, we blame coaches so much. Is it up to Moore to coach him to make that throw, or is that on the player?
I think on the player. I mean, I don't know what a coach can do. Maybe there's some advanced coaching techniques that Kellen Moore doesn't have. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think Kellen Moore's the greatest offensive coach that ever lived. But, he's a pretty good one. Like I said, we do see plenty of guys being open at times. So
yeah. Oh, listen, I said earlier today, he had Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott. He's calling plays, and those guys are making the plays. Is he calling plays and saying, I'm calling the same stuff? Those guys are making the throws. This guy's not. What am I supposed to do?
Well, I'm sure that's, and most good coaches check themselves. They say, what do I need to do better? What can I do better? I can't just assume because I worked with player A and player B that player C is going to do the same thing. Like, I'm sure he did different things with Justin Herbert that he did with Dallas, that they did with Dak Prescott, because they are not the same kind of quarterbacks. So I think that's been his challenge this year, is to try to figure out what works best for Jalen Hurts. Of course, he's called a lot of verticals against cover 3, right? Because you'll get those one-on-one matchups on the outside.
Yeah.
But how many teams are going to keep playing that coverage when they know that that's really the only throw that Jalen is willing to make? Or you'll play that coverage, but you'll blitz a little bit more to get him off his mark so he can't just easily throw it.
Eagles-Steelers, of course, this weekend. We'll have it for you live on 97.3 ESPN 425, the Battle of the State of Pennsylvania. It's only 6 times in the history of the NFL 2 teams from the same state have met with 10 or more wins. There's a stat for you, Geoff Mosher. Appreciate your time as always, pal.
Thanks, Mike. That's an awesome stat. Talk to you later.
All right, check out the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. Who else gives you football every day